everybody. My name is Michelle Armstrong. I am the Vice President of Value Engineering here at Trust Your Supplier. And it is not often I get the opportunity to say or welcome to or call my mentor. I have had this lady as a mentor probably for 4 years and she doesn't even realize it. I've spoken to her on many occasions. I've watched where her career has progressed, how she communicates with others, how she has this warm demeanor in actually bringing people into the conversation. So I'm really privileged to bring a young lady from Red Hook in New York to our call today, Renee Ure.
Hi, everybody. I'm Renee Ure. I have had a long career, 32 plus years with a company called IBM, and then another 7 years with a company called Lenovo. And when I retired from both companies, I decided to join TYS. I believe in TYS. I believe in the value that it brings. I don't think there's anything out there in the marketplace like it. I'm off doing that now. So thank you, Michelle.
So first of all, I heard that your first job was in Poughkeepsie, which would you believe I also had a job in, which I found very interesting when I did a bit of research today.
I'm not wait a minute, you were in Poughkeepsie? Really?
So I thought that was quite interesting because I went to university in New Jersey, which was fantastic, and had a job in Poughkeepsie around the same sort of time, maybe a couple of years south of you, but we'll not talk about that. But even then, when I went to university then, and I was doing a master's in business administration at Rutgers, it was quite difficult for me to be in Newark, New Jersey, just because, you know, from where I'm from, I didn't realize how diverse I would, what scenario I was going into, etc. But I'm just wondering, 1985 seems a few years ago. How did it feel for you joining a company like IBM, who were very well known as a male-dominated engineering workforce for a long period of time? How did that feel for you?
Yeah, first of all, I was told, and this is kind of funny. Here I am, I start IBM, very proud. By the way, it was a year that jobs didn't come easy. We had a recession in the US. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I got a job was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And then you go into a very male-dominated world. And I was raised to really to be an equal to everybody, right? My parents didn't have any, they weren't racist. We had all types of folks at our house, you know, different countries. So that's the way I was raised. And what I soon found out is the tech world was pretty male dominated. And in order to make it, I remember telling them I had a finance degree. And people looked at me like I had like leprosy. It was like, finance? You don't have an engineering degree? You should go back for your engineering degree. Thinking to myself, I don't need an engineering degree. All decisions are made by financial analysis. The financial piece I can do. So I realized that it was going to be a little bit tougher for me, that I had to overachieve, that I had to become known, and that my competition happens to be a white male that's been there for years and years and years and continues to be there. So it was eye-opening for me. I had never felt that. I went to a college that was 3/4 men, 1/4 women. And I did that for a specific reason. I knew that I had to get tough, and I knew that I was going to be, this was going to be up against me, and I had to go and realize how I was going to work through this. So that's kind of when I first recognized it.
And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring that up. I did do the engineering route. So my background was originally economics, and I did an aeronautical engineer primarily, and I don't mind who listens to this because there was more men in the class, so that interested me, of course, as a young girl. But I went down that route for the pure and simple reason, school said I couldn't do it. right? It wasn't and the norm in 1986 when I was going to university for anyone from my area to go and do this male-dominated industry. And I'm definitely from a family where my mother was like, "Hey, sweetheart, anything anybody else can do, you can do too." So I'm really glad that we've both come from that similar get up and go. I actually did a wee bit of research on you today, and somebody mentioned you as a disruptor. How do you feel with that background that you've got and that drive to equality? How do you feel that as a disruptor, you've had to use that skill set throughout your career?
Yeah, so throughout my career, it became evident that, and by the way, being a disruptor wasn't my choice. It's kind of the choice of the folks that I work for, and they would always put me into very, very difficult situations. They would always put me into something that was broken and that I had to be fixed. So I wasn't a person who liked to go business as usual, take over a group that was operating, you know, all efficiencies. I didn't want that. I wanted something that was broken so that I could put my hands on it and really come out with the best solution. So all the roles I got, and I absolutely was a disruptor, even when when things didn't look that great. And there's a lot of folks out there that I was in really tough situations with, and we forged through it together. That's how you become a good leader. You have to be put in tough situations. You have to learn how to figure it out, whether you ask for help or not. And once you've done that, and once you have those accomplishments under your belt, it becomes, work becomes like fun, right? And that's the way I approached it. And I'll tell you, when I came into Lenovo, it was the exact same thing. The team wasn't operating. First of all, I had to do so much with that group. And it's not that they're great, but there were no women executives. And I look back at that time and I'm saying, why didn't these folks get their chance? Okay, they live in different countries. Some of them live in different countries. That's great. You need a global leadership team that's all over the world. And how do I promote the best? Right? We had a woman population of about 38-40%, yet I had no leadership that were executives in that space. Something's wrong. So I had to accelerate, and when I left, our minorities and our women, were close to 30% of the executives when I left versus 0 when I got there. So
Question for you, Renee. So a disruptor, if I use that word, because it's everywhere, every search engine I did on you today is there. I think that from a business acumen and a career model, definitely I can understand why you've had to be a disruptor. You've went through economic crisis, you've went through supply chain crisis. Where also do you feel that disruptive nature within you, and you've just mentioned that there with Lenovo, how have you taken that and nurtured those organizations to recognize, gender equality?
it takes very short period of time for you to identify who are your ambassadors, who are the people that really make the engine work, and you can identify them pretty quickly. And what you have to do, and I walked into my first town hall in Lenovo, and the one thing I said was, "Man, there's a lot of white guys, or no, older white guys with gray hair." And here's my HR person saying, "Cut it out, Renee, cut it out, cut it out." Right. But by the way, it was the truth. How do we get the cycle to start? How do we get the young folks that are eventually going to take over, right? How do we get them in? So we started a rotational supply chain program of kids to come in. By the way, we were very stringent. We hired from the best schools. So if you're listening to this, you're at Lenovo and you're in the supply chain rotational program, you are one of the best, right? And that's what we went after. We looked for upping our value. Now, we had an issue with bench strength of our minorities. And we purposely went to schools that we could go and target minorities. We were looking for people that were different so that our team became more inclusive. It took a long time. I will tell you that I left the team much better than when I started the team. And it's amazing what you find when you have everybody working together.
So whether we have gender or diversity, equality, and it sounds like that you've put in some really strong initiatives and programs into Lenovo, which is exceptional, and lots of other organizations should do it. But it's okay putting, people from diversities, etc., into those roles. How did you measure the success of that particular person, never mind that it was providing corporate responsibility of managing diversity, etc., within the organizations?
Each person that the executive team feels has the attributes to be a leader. Either to be a leader and to go the executive path, or to go more technical in the supply chain space. And we identified them, and Lenovo has an extremely strong program that it identifies people. And you almost fill out, each year you fill out a plan for that person. The experiences they're going to get. What experiences would be good for them? We have an agreement on them, and then we start, developing them, I'll call it. Because, I was looking at, I'm speaking in a couple months at a supply chain conference. And one of the things I asked one of the ladies to get is, I will guarantee you that where it gets lost, companies go and they recruit. And by the way, I think they do a good job in recruiting, most companies. And they do a good job in recruiting a diverse group. But then as a diverse group comes in, and there's companies that do a piss poor job knowing that you've got to get that population to here.
Exactly.
And they don't do the piece of it. By the way, that's the fun piece of it. I mean, I've always been accused that my folks that are in my group are like my children, and they absolutely are. Right? You develop them just like you develop your children. And I hate putting that the same, but they're gonna falter, they're gonna fall. You got to help them get up, give them encouragement, talk about how they could have done it differently, and then moving on. This gets done for men. And I got to tell you, for women and minorities, it's like it doesn't happen. Like in a normal world, 58%, I think it was 57% white males come in. And then it's all the others. So they're the majority. But how come they're the majority in the C-suite? It shouldn't be like that. Your C-suite, and I've said this forever, your C-suite should be a reflection of the demographics of your team. So if your team is 40% women, then your leadership should be 40% women. And if you always use that in the back of your head, now it's not always perfect, but it's a really good barometer to use. And keep that in the back. You want to be led by people that look like you.
Can I ask a question? Right, and maybe it's going against the norm. So I recognize that you're saying if there's 40% women, there should be 40%. I'm definitely of the thought that if I'm good enough, it doesn't matter what gender, sex, diversity that I belong to, I should be able to succeed. Now that comes up across a lot of areas. Now, from a global organization, how do we manage cultural differences? How do we manage perception? Because again, my perception is I'm as good as the person beside me, irrespective of their gender, sex, diversity or cultural difference. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. how did Lenovo recognize that, yes, we need to play this part from a demographic, a diversity perspective. We need to manage global and gender equalities and, coming from different countries and cultures. How do they manage that wide maze of, diversity that they need to get and ensure that they're getting the right leader, not just because they belong to one of those sectors?
It's a very funny question, but it's a simple question, and let me answer it and see if this makes sense. Lenovo's business is selling things to people. They're in the consumer market and they're in the enterprise market. When you're in the consumer market, you're not just selling to white men. You're selling to kids, you're selling to women, you're selling to minorities. So if Lenovo wants to be successful, they have to design their products for everybody. And so Lenovo looks at it as if this is money in our pocket. We have to have that diversity if we're going to be number one in ThinkPad, which we are. Which they are. I'm still saying we. But the fact is, if you're selling and your product, your bread and butter comes from selling those products, you have to have diversity on those, on the development skills. They came from nothing, being a Chinese company. They merged with IBM and they had to change. I believe that there will be a business case, a Harvard Business Review on Lenovo, because they were a very Chinese company that became a global powerhouse. You can't do that without following some of these principles. Have to.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think, you've brought up there, some of the Asia Pac market, and even between Asia Pac and Europe, and Americas, their diversity laws are so different, and some of them are slightly slower in actually, coming across. And I think, DEI is going to get even more importance with, sustainability laws as well. How do you feel that, that cultural variance, how can that actually, disseminate somebody to actually go, we need to attract more diverse minorities in this region. We need to encourage them and in some ways, empower them to actually become leaders. How do you think that, how do we do that?
I'm going to say this to be disruptive, but it's absolutely true. It's got to come from the top.
Yeah.
Because if it starts and it swells, that's great. But if you don't have the agreement of the leadership on top, and for me, I'm talking the C-suite, then you've got honestly nothing.
With your experience, like you were the chief operating officer at Lenovo, you were the VP of global operations and supply chains at IBM. How did you get your incorporate meal allies, incorporate the C-suite to actually recognize that, to put mentoring programs in place, to talk about DEI? Because I'm telling you now, 1985, when I started my career, it was definitely not a subject that was discussed in my HR roles.
Well, first of all, you have to have a leadership group that supports you. And by the way, I will tell you that IBM was very good at this, but it wasn't instinctive. Like it wasn't ingrained on everybody. Where Lenovo was very different. It was like, if you want to succeed in this marketplace, you have to think differently. And you have to put the programs. And by the way, there's no secret that I was really good at it because I saw the results. When I had a diverse group, I had the results of the business. And when you have those results, you get the confidence. and then you get the dollars to continue on. That's the sign of a really good company. If a company's doing it because it's a buzzword, because everybody else is doing it, don't go to that company. You can probably get it out of an interview with three questions that you could really see how important it is. Go to a company that's going to recognize your talents and then reward you for them. It's pay for performance. I try to tell everybody, it's pay for performance. We do really good, Lenovo pays you really well. We do really poorly, you get nothing. It's very simple. And other companies don't do that. And I think the reward system is one of the best. If you make your goals and achievements, you get paid big butt. Money speaks a lot for people, right?
Yeah. And I think that's probably where I'm always, I always have to go, it doesn't matter who I am, where I'm from, I've got my own diversity backgrounds, etc. I just want to be a female that's empowered, that is accepted, that, can have experienced resistance and backlash, especially in my earlier part of my career. And what can I do, even as an individual, to ensure, specifically for me, women and intersectionality empowerment? What do you think we should be doing in industry today to ensure that? Because intersectionality, especially, is widening every single day. And it's important that we recognize that, we recognize the unique challenges that people are facing, and even when they apply for jobs, how they're going to be accepted. What do you think is the right way from an employment perspective and a hiring perspective that we should be doing going forward?
Well, you always have to put KPIs in place. And by the way, your most important KPIs should be your HR KPIs, because it's about your people.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's very simple. And by the way, you couldn't believe, and the story that I wanted to tell you earlier, which would probably be good here, is I was in my second assignment as an executive. So I'm 2 years into it. And I was with IBM. And our HR partner accidentally, you ready for this? Accidentally sent me all my peers, including my salary. Accidentally. So I remember that's when we had phones, right? I mean, we always use phones, not cell phones. So I had a phone in my office and it would always tell you who was calling. So his name comes up and I said, Stan, how you doing? What's up? Delete the email. Stan, delete what email?
Error.
The email that I sent. Okay, Renee, promise me you'll delete the email. And by the way, I kept my promise. I did delete the email, but I read every bit of it beforehand. Do you know the closest person to me, I was paid 35% less. Can you imagine? And I'm like, I can't believe this, because there's some companies, they don't want anybody knowing anybody's salary. I get that. Yeah. But now I really get why, right? And now, the important thing is, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Now, it was very clear to me that I had to go back and look at all my future leaders to see where they were from a salary perspective. And if any were a minority or a woman, right, I would check. But if they're doing it to me, and I'm supposedly, a VP at that point, they're doing it to everybody, right? So it was interesting to me, and that's the first thing I look at. And I'll tell you, there are people that you can go out and interview and say, what kind of boss was Renee? And they'll say, she is tough as hell, but damn it, she's fair as hell. Because if you take the risk, I'm going to give you the reward, right?
Do you feel there still is gender pay inequality?
Absolutely. Not even a doubt.
And how do we rectify that?
it's very difficult to rectify. You've got to have legislation in there for wherever you are. So if you're in Europe, what's the legislation? But honestly, there has to be something governing to look at it on a regular basis. By the way, I never made that mistake. I always, and people will always be credited for what they have done, especially because we make our biggest movements when we take the toughest risks. And if somebody puts their job on the line to take those risks and it works out, you've got to reward people. And even if it doesn't work out, there's something in the process that they should have learned that is going to be really good for them to know for the future, right? Every experience you have, take it for a learning aspect.
So I know you've got a new, you have semi-retired. I think we need to tell the audience that semi, although you're still working pretty much full time for Trust Your Supplier, which, by the way, is a diverse women-owned organization. And you've also set up your own business, which is phenomenal. So I don't know what the word retirement means in your dictionary. I'm interested though in that business because it is about empowerment. It's about, teaching people to be leaders. Question for you: who comes to you? Is it both genders? Is it diversity? What, as an owner of that type of business, I'd like to know who your client type is.
So what I am looking for is women businesses that are dealing with some adversity. And I am more than willing to help out folks in that manner. That's who should come. And it could be any problem. I've handled so many different problems in my career. I've been put on the back burner. I've been penalized. I've been told that I'm a shithead. I've been told everything, right? My skin is so thick, there's no way that anybody can beat me down. I can help
That's
people.
Brooklyn blood. That's that Brooklyn blood from Red Hook.
Yes,
you've got there.
It absolutely is. But I do think it's very important that people that have a dream, people that have a goal, I help people achieve those things. It's simple. Can I be tough? Can I be brutal? Am I going to tell you what you probably don't want to hear? Yeah. But I'm going to help you achieve the goal that you want to achieve. And that's what I wanted to do in starting a business. And right now I have TYS that I'm working with. I have another company that I'm working with out of Israel. Why? Because I love their product. So it's companies that I really respect their product and helping them, just advising them what I think they should do. And they're all in enterprise, right? They're more enterprise type clients. But to me, that's my perfect client, a woman who is struggling and needs some help, advice. I absolutely would love to help folks like that.
So I've got a couple of final questions for you. So first of all, I've seen that you had a fabulous holiday this Christmas, but the one part that I was interested in was a certain T-shirt that your family bought for you. And it would be great if you could tell the audience what was on your T-shirt in comparison to your other family members.
Oh boy, you're going to really make me go to my pictures. Okay, so I did pick them out. And what I tried to do is pick out for each one. I have two sons, one's married. And what I wanted to do is just something that would depict them. So now I'm going to tell you what my shirt, because my shirt was classic. You didn't tell me you were going to ask this question. I could have had it. I know I could have had it ready for you.
Oh, I've already seen it, so I can actually tell you it was.
Tell me what it is, so I'm not looking for it.
Something to do with most likely to boss.
Yes, to boss Santa. Yep.
So I thought that was quite interesting that, taking your role as, an executive working for one of the largest companies in the world, and yet that role and that executive leadership is taken into your home life as well, which I think just depicts women mothers in general. And finally, one last thing I wanted to talk about, two things, sorry, is I also know there's a young grandson.
Yes.
So how would you teach your grandson in the 21st century today about gender equality and diversity?
My daughter-in-law is just fabulous. She was working for a company. She had Vincent. She wanted to still continue work, but she didn't want to work, 10 hours a day because she had the little one. So she started her own company, and she's making just as much money, working less hours a day and having more time with my grandson, which has just proven to be such a good business model. Um, but she's very inclusive. Everything about her is just very inclusive. And the way that she is raising my grandson, I couldn't be more proud between her and my son.
So 1985 in Poughkeepsie, we didn't meet, we should have, but in 1985 to 2025 next year, it's a long time, it's 40 years. Industry has definitely improved. We've had a female prime minister in the United Kingdom. We definitely haven't had anything in the United States, but that could be another subject for another day.
Yes.
With industry exploding as much as it has in 4 years, do you feel we are still behind? And do you think we're going to get to a stage of
We're still
equality
behind.
in the near future?
We're still behind. There are other countries that look as the leadership of their country can be a female, and we haven't done that yet. We have very important positions that are females. And I've said this on every time I'm asked. I just think women can handle, number one, stress. They're used to, handling 10 things at one time. We've had to do that our whole lives. So, I just think it's time that women are looked upon for their brain and nothing else. And I don't think we're there. I think the US is behind. I think there's European countries that are ahead of us. And I think that we have a long way to go. Will it happen during my lifetime? I just don't see it. But we still have to fight, right? We still have to fight. And having this conversation is good because it's awareness. But the more important thing is helping people achieve their goals when they're much, newer in their career. I don't want them to go through the same steps that I went through and falter where I faltered. I want to be able to help people do that.
You have mentored for 40 years and have been mentored by some exceptional women, as well. It sounds like your mum especially. I feel I've been definitely mentored right from my mum, from a maths teacher who, by the way, somebody who I look up to is Catherine Johnson, which is, a mathematician. That's my background, absolutely, within NASA. We have moved forward at a real rapid pace. There is still a lot to do. But with leaders like yourself and with your new business as well, we are really excited what the future brings. And I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate the mentorship and leadership that you provide to Trust Your Supplier and to industry in general.
Well, together we're going to kick some ass, right?
Thanks, Renee.
Okay, thank you.